Plo Koon who found me and brought me to the temple where I belonged.
You never would have made it as Obi-Wan's Padawan. But you might make it as mine.
More than you realize, I understand wanting to walk away from the Order.
I know. What do you want with Anakin Skywalker?
He is the key to everything. Ahsoka.
Anakin, this place is ancient. Like a world between worlds.
Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Nerdy AF. I am Finch, and this is my co-host.
Hey, love.
All right, and today on this episode, we are talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is Ahsoka. As you well know, the Disney Plus series is out now, and Kayla and I kind of have this interesting dynamic in the sense that, as you can tell from my background, I am an Ahsoka Tano nerd. I have been from the beginning, through Clone Wars, through Star Wars Rebels, and now into the Disney Plus show. Whereas Kayla's only exposure to Ahsoka is the first 3 episodes of the show that she's watched and me talking about it for a year. So,
True.
So we wanted to dive into that and sort of our thoughts on it, where everything is at. If you are completely new to Ahsoka Tano, this is kind of a quick sort of Ahsoka Tano 101 if you're watching the show or wanting to watch the show, but you don't know where to begin. So we'll start off right here. Kayla, your experience, you've watched the first 3 episodes of the show. What do you think so far?
I really enjoy it. The other shows that have come out before that from Star Wars have kind of been like meh, like a little bit of a miss for me. Especially Andor, I had a hard time really getting into that one. And before that, Book of Boba was kind of like mixed feels. Mandalorian so far, really, for someone who, like for me, I joined the Star Wars game pretty late in life. Like I honestly didn't watch any of them for my first time until like 3 years ago. And even then, that was kind of very slow progression of me being able to watch it and then jumping into the Mandalorian rate, like even like a year after it came out. So I have very minimal like lore knowledge, and I haven't watched, as if anyone's listened to our previous podcast, it's still on my to-do list to watch the animated Star Wars related shows. So for me, you know, where you might learn a lot of that background information on Ahsoka, like I'm coming in babyface, like I don't know anything. So I got to start the show with the previous expectations of those shows kind of being a little mid. And then this one so far, I think the cinematography is great. The writing is great. I can see a lot of the messages so far. I really enjoy it. And I think it's nice and fresh, from what we've been given as of more recently. And I like seeing strong, badass women, of course. So the show so far, the first 3 episodes, I watched all of them within like 48 hours.
It is really good stuff. For like I said earlier, you can just like imagine there's a chalkboard behind me and I'm writing like Ahsoka 101 on it here. Clone Wars, Star Wars Clone Wars ran 7 seasons. And at the very beginning of that is when we first get introduced to Ahsoka Tano. And at the time she's, I want to say in the range of like 14 years old. And she's been assigned to Anakin Skywalker as his Padawan. And a lot of people weren't happy with the character when it was first introduced. I was one of them as well. I eat my words now, but at the time I'm like, this little girl is so annoying. She's such a brat. Like, I can't believe I'm wasting my time with this. But the interesting thing about the character and the interesting thing about the Clone Wars animated show is that if you're coming into it fresh, like you're sitting down today wanting to watch like season 1, episode 1 of the Clone Wars, I really feel that at that time it was geared towards a younger audience. It was geared towards like 11, 12, 13-year-olds. But as the show went on, it matured. And as the show matured, so did the characters, including Ahsoka Tano. Throughout the course of these 7 seasons, you get to basically watch her grow from this naive, yet kind of like happy-go-lucky, let's go get him 14-year-old into like a 19-year-old who has spent the last 5 years at war. And has a lot more maturity to her, a lot more complicated views on the world and on the war itself. But I will say to people who, if you're interested in the Clone Wars, let me just say, if you don't want to watch all of Clone Wars, go watch the last 4 episodes of season 7, which is the final season. Watch those last 4 episodes, which if you're a Mandalorian fan, you will love, because it's literally Ahsoka Tano and Bo-Katan leading the Mandalorians in the Siege of Mandalore against Darth Maul and Death Watch. And you see a lot of the threads already there of what happens in the Mandalorian, and then of course kind of like eventually leading into what we see in Ahsoka Tano, Ahsoka show. Do that, and it's phenomenal. And there is a lightsaber battle in there between Ahsoka Tano and Darth Maul that they did like real motion live capture of, where they had like the people like choreographing it. And in all of Star Wars, I think it's one of the coolest Star Wars or lightsaber battles I have ever seen. That in of itself is worth watching those 4 episodes. But now we're at a point with the Ahsoka show where we're dealing with an Ahsoka who's maybe 40s, early mid 40s, maybe. Definitely a vastly different character than we originally saw when Clone Wars started, but still fascinating, still interesting, and I'm excited to see where the rest of the show goes.
And with that being said, there's been like a good time gap from what you had seen Ahsoka to what we see now. Is there any changes that they've made in the live action depiction of her that you can note, or is it exactly on par what you would expect with her character?
It's pretty close to on par throughout the Star Wars Rebels, which chronologically takes place after Star Wars Clone Wars, ran 4 seasons, and it picks up a few years after Clone Wars ends, and that we see Ahsoka Tano, who's a little bit older, maybe into like our late 20s, perhaps, and she's not a main character in the show. Like, she's not in every episode. She kind of comes in and out for different storylines. So what we see in the show Ahsoka it is interesting because she is a lot more stoic. She is a lot more down to earth, a lot more straight and narrow. Still has a tiny little bit of that playfulness, which was sort of like the hallmark of her character early on. And we've seen that gradually change over the course of time. And a lot of it's because, again, watching all these shows, she started off like I think so many do in life, 14 years old, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, an idealist. This is for the Republic. This is for the Jedi Order. This is blah, 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 blah. As life goes on, you realize things are a lot more complicated. They're not as black and white as you thought they were. You see a lot of death, a lot of destruction, experience a lot of personal heartbreak. A lot of the things that had been the foundation of her life, she finds to be completely false or completely destroyed in front of her. And that has an impact on somebody big time. I mean, the very end of the last episode of Clone Wars in and of itself is heartbreaking. I know I'm telling you to go watch these last 4 episodes, but at the end of it is very heartbreaking just watching. Yeah. So far that's kind of like what I'm experiencing.
Yeah. And that transition, like you put it really nicely, like the results of who she is now is based on all these things that happen in between. And, one thing that I thought was interesting. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, guys. We just had a technical issue there, but just wanted to give a spoiler warning because we're going to be talking about episodes 1 through 3. So if you haven't watched yet, this would be your time to save the podcast, watch or listen to it after the show. But we're going to dive into some details now. And so for me coming into the show, not having any known experiences besides for her saying like, yeah, I worked under Anakin, he was training me. One interesting thing that I got to see in this show without knowing her upbringing was when she was flying with Sabine and she was just kind of like going a little crazy and she was kind of laughing, that playfulness. It reminded me of Anakin when they were chasing when he was with Obi-Wan and he was just like doing whatever he wanted. Like it reminded me a lot of Anakin in that moment when they were just flying like crazy. Did you catch that too?
Yeah, and that was always kind of the interesting hallmark. Now when you go if you get into the canon, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, when he was a youngling, he was very rebellious. And he was paired up with Qui-Gon Jinn because Qui-Gon Jinn was rebellious. And that had the impact of it straightened Obi-Wan out. Like he ended up adhering more to the code because his master was always going off script. So there was an attempt to take Ahsoka and put him with Anakin, hoping that would have the same effect on Anakin. It did not work. Instead, it was just 2 people who were always defying the Jedi Council and then defying each other constantly. Like the amount of times Anakin would go off script and do the exact opposite of what the Jedi Council told him to do, and then get mad at Ahsoka for her going off and doing something the exact opposite of what he told her to do. So there was always that kind of. So that's always definitely been a part of Ahsoka, is that sort of like carefree sort of like, well, this may be the plan, but in the moment I see X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to act on that, and that's how this is going to go.
Right. Okay. And, so it's interesting too, without me knowing the timeline, which I'm sure there's people who are just watching these shows in the movies versus watching any of the animated stuff. Like, tell me about the timeline. Cause like when we're watching the movies, we see Anakin under Obi, and then all of a sudden that he, goes through the lava, and then he transitions into Darth Vader. So like when is he Darth Vader when she's under him as an apprentice, or like where does she fit into that timeline?
So the 7 seasons of Star Wars Clone Wars exist between Star Wars Episode 2 and Star Wars Episode 3. Okay. The interesting thing is, because as we know, Order 66 comes down in Episode 3, where all the clones turn on the Jedi, and we get to see that in Clone Wars. And those last 4 episodes I was talking about, Ahsoka Tano is with Bo-Katan on Mandalore, and she has a detachment of clone troopers from the 501st who are assisting them retake Mandalore from Darth Maul. In those 4 episodes, Order 66 happens. And, here she is, she's on, a Venerator, which is their, version of what we consider to be a Star Destroyer, flying through space, heading back to Coruscant from Mandalore with Darth Maul on board, who they've taken prisoner. And all of a sudden the clones turn on her, and she's all alone on the Star Destroyer with hundreds of clone troopers attempting to kill her. And it hits a different note than it does in the movie, because one clone trooper in particular was like Ahsoka Tano's best friend, who, Captain Rex, who was like, they had been together since the beginning of the war. Personally, they were really close friends. And all of a sudden he's attempting to kill her, and he can't help it. Like, that's the thing that they really get into in the show, is that these clone troopers had a microchip, bioorganic microchip that was in their brain that did not allow them to defy that order. It wasn't like, hey, your boss told you to do it, you got to do it. Okay, I guess I'll kill my friends. Like, there was an actual like chemical thing going on up there that they were not able to stop themselves from doing. So it's during that period, during that like last 2 episodes, is when, Anakin has his fight with Obi-Wan on Mustafar, gets turned into air fryer crisp, and then eventually becomes Vader, which we don't see in the show, but you can see her sort of like sensing it through the Force that things aren't right, that something has gone horribly, horribly wrong.
Okay, yeah, because I was curious where she really fit, because I didn't know that, because like he seemed to be still like under Obi, like with everything kind of going on, and then I didn't know that he could have a Padawan himself. So I was like, well, where is he at this point? Which they are, I think, working to describe a little bit more, probably assuming people have watched the show, maybe not, like people like me. But it sounds like, if this hasn't convinced me to watch all the other shows, I don't know what will, because I feel like I'm missing out on a lot, and all my questions will be answered just by watching those shows, but I have to make the time.
And it's a lot, because I mean, we're talking 7 seasons of Clone Wars and 4 seasons of Rebels. It is a lot. My wife Jamie had never seen Clone Wars or Rebels, and knowing that Ahsoka was coming out in August, we started all the way back in May attempting to get through all of Clone Wars and all of Rebels prior to the first episode of Ahsoka. We finished the very last episode of Star Wars Rebels at 3 p.m. on the day that the first episode of Ahsoka came out, and we were in a mad dash. So this was great. Ahsoka premiered on a Tuesday. By Friday, we had 33 episodes of Rebels left. And we tore through that mother, like on Saturday in particular. I remember I got off work. We got the kids in the car. We went to Casey's, loaded up on snacks like teenagers going on a road trip. And we came home, and Jamie and I alone got through 15 episodes that day.
Oh my God. That's a core memory right there.
Yeah, it is. It was a mad sprint. Finally got through it all just because I wanted her to have all of it in. For me, it was a good rewatch, because I had seen all of Clone Wars a couple times. Rebels I had only seen through once, and even then it was years ago since the last episode aired. So for me, it was like a great refresher. Yes, all of your questions will be answered for sure. And if you want to do that, but you're not totally into that much time, I'm sure you can Google Star Wars Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels essential episodes. Because even like Clone Wars, there are episodes here and there that have nothing to do with the bigger storyline or don't affect the overall outcome of anything. They're just tales from the Clone Wars, right? So I'm sure you could find essential episodes and perhaps save yourself, quite a few episodes, unless you just want to dive totally deep into that bad boy.
I definitely do. Especially, I don't know if anyone saw my Instagram story, me biking to the show, but like now I have something where I can have consistent exercising too, and I won't have an excuse. I had to be like, if I have to watch this, I have to get on my bike and do it all together, and then I'll be set for a couple weeks at least, depending on how fast I get through them. But I think that sounds like a wonderful idea, and I'll get caught up. Don't you worry. And going off of again, the transition from animated to live action, how are you feeling with the cast choices? Do you feel like everyone's up to par for what you were expecting? Is there anything surprising, or did they change anything compared to what you were expecting?
They're pretty on par. I've notably said in lives and other podcasts that when Rosario Dawson first dressed up and started doing Ahsoka, I think all the way back in season 2 of The Mandalorian, I wasn't against it, but I wasn't thrilled. And don't get me wrong, like I like Rosario Dawson as an actor. I really do. I respect the hell out of her. But you can't help it. When you have a character like that who is like so close to your heart, maybe nobody can stand up and do it correctly. So I was reserved. I'm like, I'm going to give it time. Like she was there and she was there a little bit in the Book of Boba Fett, but I'm like, I'm going to wait till the actual show. Now that we are 3 episodes in, so far, I am thoroughly satisfied. Like you can tell as an actor, she spent a ton of time watching Clone Wars and Rebels because so many of her even like minor mannerisms are so Ahsoka. You see Ahsoka behind me right here with her arms crossed.
Oh, yeah.
Go watch Ahsoka, the Disney Plus show, and tell me how many times she's standing there with her arms crossed. Like that's such like an iconic thing of Ahsoka to do. So far great. The actress, I feel terrible. I can't remember her name. Who they cast to play Sabine Wren. I mean, just freaking nailed it. I mean, that could not be more perfect. Mary Winstead, I believe her name, who is playing Hera. Oh my God. Like that is just, I could not be more thrilled to death with that. But so far, those are the characters that we have that are coming from the animated so far into Ahsoka. So many of the other characters like Skull and Shin Hati, none of those were in Clone Wars or Rebels. They're totally new characters. So far, casting wise, I'm absolutely thrilled to death with it.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it so far too, and I'm excited to see where this goes. Like, because the storyline is set up where it sounds like Ezra will be recovered, maybe either his remains or maybe his actual live body. Who knows? Do you have any ideas of what we might expect, or do you already? How do you feel with it? What's going to happen moving forward? Do you have any theories?
So I'll give you all the quick rundown here, the nerdy ass rundown. There was a character in Star Wars Rebels, an Imperial officer by the name of Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was one of the most intimidating bad guys I've ever seen in Star Wars. Has no special abilities, is not a Force user. He is just extremely intelligent. He's the kind of person who would stand on the bridge of a Star Destroyer watching a half of his fleet being destroyed and show absolutely no emotion and just go, interesting. In a way that kind of, like the wheels are turning. Like it's already figured out, okay, that's what went wrong. It's not going to go wrong again. Now, what you did see in the most recent episode was the Purrgil, the space whales, right? And these whales have the ability to travel in hyperspace. Deep Star Wars canon, supposedly Purrgil are the one who like created the hyperspace routes that are in use in Star Wars today. But in the very last episode of Star Wars Rebels, Ezra Bridger is on the bridge of Admiral Thrawn's Star Destroyer with Admiral Thrawn when Purrgil show up and wrap their tentacles around the Star Destroyer and just shoot off into hyperspace, presumably outside of the galaxy. Now, everything in Star Wars has always taken place inside this one galaxy, but they just off into the distance. And keep in mind, now we're catching up like maybe 5 years after that happened. And Ezra Bridger was part of the crew that Hera and Sabine were on. He was a beloved character. And it's just kind of like, and now that there's rumors that Thrawn has returned, it's like, well, where's Ezra? It's because Ezra was with him when he disappeared. So if, blah, blah, so that's a bit of what we're dealing with here. Now, this gate that they're talking, they've never done this in Star Wars before. They're talking about this gate, this hyperspace thing that supposedly has a path to another galaxy. Nowhere in Star Wars have we ever gone to another galaxy outside the one that the entire story takes place in. So what that means, I've got no idea. I have absolutely no idea. Interesting nerdy note, though, folks. If you haven't already caught this, for those of you who are like deep history nerds, such as myself, the two, they're not Sith, right? But the two Dark Force users that we see in the show, Skull and Shin Hati, Hati and Skull in Norse mythology are the name of the two wolves that were in the sky that chased the sun and the moon around, that created the day-night cycle. And yet here we are around this round portal with these two involving supposedly a path to another galaxy. So there's a little bit of a fun mythology there. Whether that leads us to knowledge of any foreshadowing of what may come, I have no idea, but it tickles the brain to think about anyway.
Yeah, I had no idea about that. I think it's really cool too, because this is monumental, right? Being able to go to a different galaxy and like what will they find? Will there be other people with the Force out there? Will they help to replenish? Is there more like Jedi or Jedi adjacent folks that we can learn from? Like, you know, that can obviously create a whole different realm, literally, that can continue on with the Star Wars universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we don't know. And there was also, dude, I could like go off on an hour-long tangent. I'm not going to. But at one point in time in Star Wars Rebels, Ahsoka and Ezra Bridger ended up in a place called the World Between Worlds, which was basically this like blank space in the Force that's outside of time and space, of which there were windows to where you could see literally to other points in time and see things happening, could actually interact with it. Like we have this thing at the end, I think it was the end of like season 2 of Rebels, where Vader and Ahsoka Tano are in a lightsaber battle. And they're fighting, and then the story moves and watches what else is going on. And the end of it, you just see Ahsoka and Darth Vader from opposite sides, like basically limping off, and you never were shown what was happening. And then all of a sudden you get into season 4 of Rebels, and Ezra Bridger is in the World Between Worlds, and through this portal, he can see that fight. He can see Ahsoka and Darth Vader fighting, and he's worried that Ahsoka is going to get killed. And so he literally reaches through and grabs Ahsoka and pulls her into the World Between Worlds and pulls her out of the fight. You know, and it's so whether that's going to come into play in this whole thing. And the other thing to keep in mind, Dave Filoni is the guy. Like Dave Filoni was the showrunner for Clone Wars. He was the creator of Star Wars Rebels. He was creator of the show The Mandalorian. He's doing the show Ahsoka. So he's got his fingers in all this. This is all his baby from the very, very beginning. That's why there's so many of these threads interconnected, you know, and threads that are just running everywhere. That's got people like me on crazy conspiracy theories as to what's going on.
No, and I'm thriving off of it, because going into all of this and hearing your sides of things, what you're expecting and excited for, it obviously makes me super excited too. And I think, you know, based on from what I'm hearing, you're very happy with this show, and you're on edge as well with expectations and also no expectations, because it literally can go any which way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and awesome. we're waiting to see what's going on with Sabine, because this whole, like, she had been Ahsoka's Padawan, none of that was in Star Wars Rebels. You know, Sabine Wren is a Mandalorian, formerly one of the major houses of Mandalore. And she had been on her own for a long time. She was part of this little crew that Star Wars Rebels surrounds herself around. And at one point in time, she wielded the Darksaber, which we see very prominently in The Mandalorian. And at one point in time, there was a Jedi by the name of Kanan Jarrus who was training Ezra Bridger and was training her to use the Darksaber. And he's having a conversation with Hera, and she's like, "Are you able to train her? Are you struggling to train her because she's not Force sensitive?" And Kanan Jarrus says, "No, she's Force sensitive. Everybody is. It's just a matter of, you know, the problem is her mind is clouded. She's got a lot of anger, a lot of blah, 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 blah." And Hera's like, "So basically she's a Mandalorian." And he's like, "Yes." You know, so this whole like aspect of like, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, because we see Ahsoka training Sabine Wren now in the show, and she tries to reach out in that episode with the cup and like use the Force, and it doesn't move. So we don't know if there's like a latent talent here that she just hasn't been able to tap into yet, and whether she's going to actually become like a full-on Jedi-esque character, or what's going to happen there. I don't know, but I'm excited to find out.
Me too, especially when I saw the scene of her cutting her hair. Anyone knowing anything about cinematography knows that shit's about to go down when a woman cuts her hair, especially short.
Yes.
That is a concrete visual imagery of someone literally changing their person, flipping to the next chapter of their life, hitting that character development, and something big and monumental is going to happen. And it's like putting the old person to rest, coming into like this new form,
Mhm.
caterpillar to butterfly thing. So I think granted, not knowing anything about her, I think it's going to be, really interesting having the combination of like Jedi Mandalorian. But I don't know what to expect either, because it's refreshing to see someone, compared to the movies and some of the shows, like it's just not coming super naturally to her. They're not super gifted. They don't have this high aptitude for the Force, but they're still trying. And that's something that, I think is more reflective of most people day to day. Practice makes perfect. Sometimes you have to fall down 1,000 times before you can actually go. And I really do like and like enjoy that and seeing it in the show, to see her not giving up, still trying, and knowing that regardless if she can barely wield it at all, that she's still worthy and has really valuable skills that we see with her repairing things, flying, all that stuff. She has good strategies that still make her like a very valuable character.
Absolutely. And that her cutting the hair was such a powerful scene. And it was great because it literally mirrors shot for shot a part in Star Wars Rebels where Kanan Jarrus did the exact same thing. He had a long ponytail and he was a Jedi, and he had to go do something that was monumental and wasn't sure how it was going to go. And it was the exact same thing where he got down on his knees, put his lightsaber on the ground in front of him, and reached back and cut his ponytail off, as if to say, I'm no longer a Padawan, because he was a Padawan when Order 66 happened, and then was kind of off on his own. And the rest of his life, he was almost sort of self-trained to the point of trying to train others. Frame for frame, like the similarities are like, I mean, to the point where like when you've seen Rebels and you see Sabine doing that, goosebump city, because you're just like, oh, shit's gonna get real, and I love that. I love, some people are complaining, right? Because they always do. They're like, are they trying to like go back and like say she's force sensitive when she never was before, but blah blah blah. Like, no, I think that's exactly it. We're watching this character go through a journey, and I'm excited to see where it ends up, especially if this down the road plays into the show The Mandalorian. So if you have a Mandalorian Jedi and you've got Grogu out there and all the funds, like this could go a bunch of different ways, all of which I think could be really awesome.
Yeah, no, I agree too. And, for anyone who has grown out their hair can see that her hair was really long. And the timeline it's been since she was working with Ahsoka, did they say how many years was in between when they stopped?
No. We know it's been a few years, like maybe if
Okay.
it's been 4 or 5, somewhere in there, perhaps.
Right, yeah, because I'm curious too, because like her hair is obviously two different colors, and to have your hair grow all the way down to your back, that's like at least a 2.5, 3 year growth. And then, so maybe what she is doing too, it's like cutting off the person that Ahsoka used to know because she's ready now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the hair she had, because like the orange was probably at the top of her head at that moment, that might have been what is related to like when she was working with Ahsoka and she's like, I'm a new person now, chop. None of that remains. I think that I can see a little bit of that, but granted, don't know for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And that was one thing she was known for throughout Star Wars Rebels, was always changing her hair color, was always purple or some weird shade. I think when the show ended, she had orange hair. So that would kind of denote the timeline that has passed, is that she hadn't cut her hair since then, because she always kept her hair short, as that she's let it grow this entire time. And that's why there's the orange at the bottom there. Right. It's cool. I'm like giddy, like a little schoolboy, just excited for all the like nerdyism and where everything's going.
Me too. I think, knowing your love for Ahsoka, I really hope that this show is everything that you dreamt of. And so far, with how it's going, I do see that there's probably going to be a second season. They have like a really good setup so far. So across the board, Ahsoka, 10 out of 10, really enjoying it. It sounds like you're on the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 thumbs up. Siskel and Ebert approved. I'm excited to see where it goes. I think with these shows, the only downside to it is that like before you know it, it's like the last episode, and you're like, no, because it felt that way with The Mandalorian too. You're like, oh god, we only have an episode left. That sucks. But so far I'm loving it.
Good. Yeah. And do you know how many episodes is expected to have for this season? Like,
No.
how much is usually in a Mandalorian? Like 12 or 13?
Yeah, I think so. We're gonna find out how many episodes, provided my internet works on my phone. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be 8 episodes. So we have 5 left. That already doesn't feel like enough. I feel like this needs to be like a 52 episode season.
Okay. Oh, we're already 3 in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope that there's a movie.
That would be great.
Not enough.
Yeah. That would be the hope, is that between like the Mandalorian shows and Ahsoka, that it eventually all draws together and they can do like one like big 2-hour movie, kind of like Endgame, that like draws all that into like one major event. And if they're introducing Admiral Thrawn, that's like the perfect person, because he went to war with the Mandalorians. He went to war with the remaining Jedi. He was like, he could literally be like the big bad, the Thanos, right? That brings all these like separate parts together and makes it one really awesome epic storyline.
Yeah, no, I agree. And based on from what I'm hearing too, it sounds like maybe that's what Disney is preparing for. Because when we're thinking about cinema in general, like a great Star Wars movie after a bunch of the shows, like that's exactly what I think a lot of people want. Same thing too. Like they built up all the Avengers, gave them their own personal stories, and then boom, threw them together. And Endgame was one of the most notable movies in, our generation. So, our generations. And I think it's going to be. Sometimes I forget me and Finch aren't the same age. He's a hair over 26.
just a hair. Just a hair. Yeah. Yeah. As a total side note, like when we were hanging out in Florida together several months ago, I made some comment. I'm like, oh man, I remember this happened. That was like, oh, when was it? Oh yeah, it was like summer of 97. And I was talking to my friend and Kayla interrupted. She's like, that's the year I was born. I'm like, oh man, that's weird.
Rude. Yeah, I know. It is funny. But 1997 was a wonderful year, so I've been told. Best year for like a bunch of movies, shows. Honestly, what else? I thought there was a bigger list than that. Me coming into the world.
Yeah. There's like the BK and the AK. It was like where we're going to delineate time, is that before Kayla and after Kayla in terms of the universe. That's what we're gonna go with. Yeah.
When you said BK, my mind went to Burger King. I'm like, hell yeah,
way. You rule.
I do like the BKAK because when it comes, we were talking about this before we started talking and recording on the show, but like for me and Finch, we were reminiscing because a lot of people are now at Dragon Con this year, and that's where we met, and we're like, dang, like thinking back, like we haven't known each other for super long, but like when you guys watch this stuff, listen to us, like this is just like we knew each other in the womb. Like we were best buddies because he's only a hair above 26, remember?
Only a gray hair above 26, yeah.
Right? And like it's crazy to think that we've only met a few times in person. And so before Kayla, after Kayla, like Finch's life changed for the better. Mine did too. We started traveling. We got out. Life really started for me. Granted, I was in that transitional journey coming from school to work and adulthood, but like for Finch, I think you unlocked a new level for yourself, and you got to be, I think the first time we went in California, you said like that was the first time being to the ocean in a long time, and then a couple months later you were in Florida, on to the other ocean.
Yeah, and when we did Dragon Con last year, that was the first time I had ever cosplayed, when I did Billy Butcher at Dragon Con last year. And now I've got like, I swear, like 5 different cosplays I'm in progress of making right now for future cons. So yeah, absolutely, it has been.
I know, and we're really excited because in a few more weeks we have the Minnesota Ren Fair and then the Uncanny X-Men experience. And if anyone's going there, feel free to comment either on here on YouTube or on podcast, Instagram, whatever, wherever you can comment and let us know if you're going to any of those things or what you would like us to record if you're missing out, because we're going to try to capture all the stuffs. We're going to probably make a really good comprehensive YouTube video, put stuff on our Instagram, but we are stoked. It's only 2 weeks away, right?
Yeah. And 2 weeks from right now, we will be at the Uncanny Experience. And I could not be more excited. A, because I get to hang out with Kayla again. B, I'm a huge X-Men fan. We both are looking forward to this thing happening. So yeah, it's we're freaking amped, man.
Yes. C is that we're gonna eat a turkey leg and drink some mead and enjoy the show.
Yeah, and probably raid a monastery while we're at it. That I'm excited for.
Yes, I did go to a Catholic school, so I should know all the ins and outs.
Yes. You will let us know what we can take and what we can't, and
Yes.
we'll leave it burning in our wake and look back and remark at what a good day it was.
Yes, I'm really excited, and for that, I'm gonna actually be going in cosplay from one of the books. Granted, it wasn't the one I originally wanted to do, but the character is still badass nonetheless. I can't wait to show that off. I think I got most of the stuff for it. And Finch hasn't even seen it yet either. So he's trying to catch up in the book series, but I will let you guys know. I think I might have already done that, but it's a Sarah J. Maas. It's from Throne of Glass. So take a guess on who I'm going to be. You have to read a lot more Finch.
Yeah.
I think you have to get to you have to read a few books to get a good... You'll know who I am once you get to that point.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of like the flip side. I'm kind of like with you with Clone Wars and Rebels now, where I'm like,
the lore, I miss out.
Yeah, the lore.
Yes, I know. And that's something, I think it'd be fun to do an episode on because, we talk a lot about more like the shows, the movies, but once we get up to the book realm, because this series is like the upcoming, if not already, like going to take over the popularity of like Harry Potter, which is a cult classic. And they're planning on making like the ACOTAR series by Sarah J. Maas into a television show. And that I think is going to be a hit, hopefully. She's very strict where she's been like just breaking up deals if they're not going with her exact writing. Because she's like, I have a vision. My fan base is humongous. You're doing what I say. And if you don't, we're not working together. And that it's already happened twice where she's like, nope. So yeah, I respect that. I'd rather have no show than a shitty show. But that means you need to catch up. And for anyone who's looking for like a multiverse type read, there's 3 series written by Sarah J. Maas. If you're going to read them, read the ACOTAR series, then the Throne of Glass series, then the Crescent City series. But it's going to be legendary. Canon event.
I'm excited for it.
Mic drop. Thank you.
Yo, Kayla, I'm out.
This is now after Kayla.
I love it. But we're gonna get going, folks. Thank you so much for listening to my Ahsoka ramblings, and Kayla here to like keep me on the straight and narrow. I told her before we did this episode, like, you're gonna have to like keep a clock on me, because if you just like turn the mic on, let me go, I will talk for hours and hours and hours about all this stuff. But hope that brought some of you up to speed, maybe got you interested in watching Rebels or watching Clone Wars. I hope so. But we are going to see you folks again. Probably the next episode you get from us will be Uncanny Experience / Ren Fair. As you can't tell, we're both so excited for that. But yeah, we're going to get out of here.
Okay, yeah. Bye, y'all. Stay safe. And don't forget to get nerdy AF.
Woo!